What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. This is an In the Trenches edition of the show here as we talk about some of the best and most impactful trench play that we've seen around the NFL for this week 3. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Ollie Connolly from the newsletter and Substack, The Read Optional. Ollie, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing good. I wish you had not made me sit through the Cowboys defensive front once again. That was a shame, but we have positives too. We'll bring positives today.
Hold on. My hands are up. I asked you what you wanted to talk about this week. That's not on me. You can't, the mics can't turn on and then you throw me under the bus like that. But obviously, I'm just joking around. It was something that we did. We had to talk about what's going on with the Dallas Cowboys because this is the team that's won 12 games in each of the last 3 seasons. People talked about them winning the division again, and boy, we talked about their run game being bad. I didn't realize the run defense on the other side was going to be even worse. We're going to dig into that in a second. We're also going to talk about a division foe for the Dallas Cowboys, Jalen Carter, and just a monster of a week that he is having and the difference that he makes on that Philadelphia Eagles defensive line. And then we're going to give a shout out to the New York Giants as well. I did not realize that this was an all NFC East show until I just said it out loud there. So we're giving NFC East fans their full cup here as we're going to talk about the Giants defensive line having their best game of the season. Was it more of what they were doing, or was it more of the Browns offensive line not being great? But we'll get to that in a second. Let's start off with the Cowboys, though. Elliott has not been a good performance from the Cowboys' run defense. It's one of the lowest graded units that we have in the NFL so far this season. I was talking about this with Dalton Wasserman on the PFF review show when we were reviewing this game, and just some statistics for everybody and how bad the Cowboys have been in run defense. I actually tried to give them the benefit of the doubt and was like, okay, well, is it just, when they stack lighter boxes, did they not really have the guys to be able to really hold up? But the Cowboys in run defense plays when they have 7 or more defenders in the box, heavy boxes, 33.4 run defense grade, last in the NFL, 15 missed tackles, 29th in the NFL, average depth of tackle, which is a stat that we have that we like to point to, which shows how often you guys are how often they're bringing guys to the ground, 5.54. Ollie, they are letting running backs get more than halfway to a first down on 1st and 10. It's that bad in Dallas. So when you took a look at the film, what's going on here with the Dallas Cowboys? Is it simply that they don't have the horses to win the race, or is something schematically maybe that they could do a little bit better here as the season goes on?
Yeah, everything is just off, right? When you talk about run defense, you can get really complex with it, but the most basic tenets are talent, technique, tenacity. Really simple. Coaches write it on the whiteboard every single offseason. This is what we need. I think they lack all 3. The interior of the defensive line just gets crushed one-on-one. They get moved on doubles all the time, and they've played 2 teams back-to-back who want to major in the run and specifically want to major in trying to get as many doubles as possible. If they can get 2 on the majority of plays, that's them in their happy place. And they just have a group of interior guys who are getting blown off the ball. Mozzie Smith has not developed in any way they would have expected. The rest are older or cannot hold up at the point of attack. And then if you work your way back, that's when the more of the technique issues come in. They just can't fit properly. They get out-gapped consistently. Linebackers struggling all over the shop. Kendricks is the only one who shows signs of, I know where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
Then they use their safeties a lot to help them with the fit. You mentioned the heavy boxes. They fit with the safeties a ton. Those guys are all over the place. Linebackers all over the place, and they get caught in these binds of either guys are arriving to the wrong places. They are the worst group in the league right now at having 2 guys in one gap at any one time. Or the front of the defensive line gets displaced and pushed over another gap. So by the time those guys arrive, they think they're in the correct gap. They're all panicking and like, where should we go? All of a sudden there's daylight. All of a sudden Derrick Henry springing out the back door. All of a sudden all of the Saints are cracking them off the ball. It's just there's no other way to say it than an utter mess. And I don't know how you can completely correct it because, as you mentioned, they've gone heavier. They had these problems last year. They played a ton of dime. No one could fit the run. The film was awful at the end of the year. They just got away with it by some of the metrics. And then this season, they bring in Mike Zimmer. They tried to get heavier. He's played in base a ton, and they still can't fit, and they still don't have the talent up front.
Yeah, and I think that, when you watch this film for the Cowboys, you want to find answers for them, right? And you want to be like, okay, well, what can we do? Who can we move at different spots? Can we align guys a little bit differently? And maybe you can, right? You can, I suppose, just absolutely sell out to defend the run, where you're almost playing a bear front where you've got just multiple defensive linemen that are going to be on the field. But of course, then you're sacrificing things at the second level. You're sacrificing guys in coverage. In today's NFL, that's not really something that's conducive to success. So when you look up front, it's more of what you said, sort of the talent part of the triple T that you mentioned when it comes to run defense there. And the guys that they have up front, it's mainly the four main defensive tackles that they have played, specifically on the interior, because that's really where I want to focus. Now, DeMarcus Lawrence, who has also been a really good run defense player over the last couple of years, has struggled this year, just as the whole unit has struggled. So DeMarcus Lawrence taking a step back in run defense has absolutely hurt this team as well. But the four main defensive tackles that they have in the rotation, it is Osa Odigizua, it is Mozzie Smith, and then it's Linval Joseph and Jordan Phillips. Linval Joseph and Jordan Phillips are two guys who are new to the team in 2024. Both of those guys are above 30 years old. Jordan Phillips is 32. Linval Joseph is 35. And I don't think that those veterans, they're trying to get a ton out of those veterans, and it's just not working. I'm watching that Ravens film specifically, and I understand combo blocks are hard for anybody to handle, right? It's two guys versus one. It's a simple math problem right there. And you would think because you are executing a combo block, you're supposed to get push. But Ollie, the push that these double teams, whether it was duo blocks or whether it was just one of the combo blocks, for one of the defense tackles, they're getting them 3, 4, 5 yards off the ball every time. These dudes just can't. There's no truly holding the line of scrimmage. And I think Jordan Phillips has been a little bit slow to get off the ball and really get into these guys. I think the same has absolutely been true for Mozzie Smith, who has been, to me, a disappointment for this team, even as a second rounder, because the floor that Mozzie is giving you is way too low right now. I have his games pulled up in his career over the last 2 years. Now, including 3 from this year, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 games in which he has a run defense grade below 50. The floor is too low for this dude. And when you put him on the field, because you want his athletic ability to shine. That's why you draft him. But right now, he is not giving you enough in run defense. And I think that it's such an interesting thing to look back on. We focused so much about what the Cowboys didn't do in the run game, right? Oh, who's going to play running back for this team? They're ignoring the run game on the offensive side of the ball. They were also ignoring the run game on the defensive side of the football. And I think that is now becoming even more of a problem for them this year. So when you see the talent part of things, is there any sort of can play better, can play in a different spot, or is it just hey, they might just have to load the defensive line in order to be better in run defense at this point?
Yeah, there's really not a lot you can do talent-wise. What you could do, as you said, is, hey, let's get an extra body in there. We're going to try and reduce the front. We'll have 3 big guys cover up all the interior guys. You mentioned the Bear fronts. The Eagles had success with that this weekend. We can talk about that. But what you're just saying by doing that is let's put one player we know has been bad on the field and take off someone who may help us out in other situations. We take Oven shown off the field or a linebacker to stick another defensive lineman down there. And so we're way worse in coverage, and our guys haven't been good in the hope that if they sit one-on-one, we have a chance. And to me, it's as bad as they've been getting blown off the ball. The big concern I have with them, and just kind of talent-wise, is just the lack of sizzle off the snap. They just don't move.
Yes.
And it's not a sit and read and react defense. They are supposed to be fitting fast. That is what they do. Everyone springs, linebackers crash, safety rolls down. It's not very complex. And so they're not lined up correctly off the ball. They are regularly looking at each other, trying to figure out what are we doing, when's the ball being snapped. Have had tons of issues with communication versus motion and all the stuff you're facing every week in the NFL now. And then the ball snaps, the first line doesn't move, they get rocked. The other guys are stood kind of slow playing their feet, then they get rocked when someone doubles and climbs to them. And the only guy who has shown any kind of like real like juice and energy is DeMarcus Lawrence, who then has just played poorly. He's just getting pushed around, but he is at least fighting. He's the only one of those guys up front, I would say. Micah, plays in kind of a different role, different way than the interior guys do. But they've shifted ever so slightly every week. Lawrence inside more and more. We need help in here. Can you at least rock someone? Can you try and command part of the double team, right? Post snap, we'll spike you inside, command some of the double team, take some heat off one of the interior players so they can try and play one-on-one. And if you're both playing 1.5 each, that's how they tried to figure this thing out. And so Lawrence is throwing himself into it, giving you that effort, but still finds himself getting rolled back because now he's facing 1.5 of a double team. So just across the board, talent, technique, all the stuff we mentioned, it's just nowhere near good enough. I mean, even the Ravens, it was at times like they'd never faced an option type attack before, right? That they're reading Micah constantly. You read the best player. That's kind of like the most basic thing of option football. You take him out by freezing his feet by reading him. Then behind him, those guys have no idea what they're supposed to be doing a lot of the time. They're trying to do these different things, these scrape exchanges we can get into if you want. They're trying to scrape it, and they end up every time with just two guys stood on the same vertical plane over the line of scrimmage, right? Lamar's first big run, busted scrape exchange, the touchdown, busted scrape exchange, Parsons overshown, stood in the same spots over and over again. So even if they weren't getting crushed inside, and don't get me wrong, they are getting crushed to like a bizarre degree. You mentioned some of the average depth of tackle numbers. It was 6.18 yards just against the Ravens. And in the fourth quarter, which people point to and say Marzi played a little better, there's some signs of life, they just took the option element out of the run game, the Ravens. They're like, we are not putting Lamar in a spot to get hurt. We think it's a blowout. They kind of whiffed on that, right? The Cowboys came back into it, but they took the option element out of the run game. So they simplified it for Dallas in the fourth quarter. When they were really cooking with their true offense, what they wanted to do, it was almost effortless.
So I do want to get into the scrape exchange stuff because I think that when people listen to the show, they love to sort of get a little bit more into the weeds about what that is. So when you say that Dallas was sort of trying to scrape exchange with Micah and everything, just go into a little bit of explaining what that is and why you do it and why that's something the Cowboys have been trying to do, and then also, kind of how it has not worked for them yet.
Yeah, well, they didn't run it all that often. Again, you don't know the exact rules, so it's just based on the film, how people roll out. Maybe they have different rules. Obviously, I'm not in that meeting room, but essentially, a scrape exchange, you're facing like a read where you either give the ball or keep the ball as the quarterback. Most basic read option play, however you want to describe it, zone read type stuff. You scrape the exchange by taking the first line, the defensive line, the read man, the outside guy traditionally, he dives inside one gap, right? Usually, you'd have the edge defender outside the width of the tackle. You have the linebacker inside the tackle, essentially. So you would normally, when you're plugging that, you would just plug one guy that goes outside the edge guy, right? The linebacker crashes inside of him. You try and scrape the exchange by moving the gaps post-snap. So the outside guy dives inside. The linebacker goes to the outside, takes the outside perimeter gap. So you just kind of try to muddy the read. For the quarterback, when he gets the snap and he's reading, is it dive? Do I give it to the running back or do I keep it? He sees the edge defender dive inside and he's like, great, I'll keep it, right? Tries to rip out the back door. The linebacker rolls around and should be stood there. Quarterback runs into his lap. That's what you're trying to get to. Now, Lamar, two things. One is ludicrously fast. Him in space against a linebacker anyway is really difficult.
Right.
And secondly, to give some, kudos to the Cowboys linebackers, when you even watch the film, it's really hard to tell if he has the ball or not. He's the all-time best, give or not, quarterback, in my opinion, going back all the way to Louisville, right? It's just really hard to tell. He pulls it so late. He kind of rips it out rather than making a decision. It's just hard to see the thing, let alone at the speed it's all going at, all the bodies in front of you. Everyone's getting bench pressed off the line of scrimmage. You're trying to look through and go, oh, God, who has the ball? So that all makes sense. What you can't have if you're scraping, right? It's pretty basic. You're trying to fill two gaps and just flip who has what assignment. You can never end up with two guys stood in the same gap. So someone either got the wrong call, didn't understand what they were doing, or people are panicking and freezing because they can't figure out what's going on.
Yeah. No, it's and obviously that it makes sense that you would sort of call that to defend Lamar, but like you said, it's easier said than done when you're trying to face Lamar and do something like that. Last thing I'll say about the Cowboys before we move on, I know that I feel like this is more a little bit stylistically than maybe like a whole defensive line, but what are your thoughts towards them being more of just like an attacking sort of front where, you mentioned like Mozzie Smith or Linval Joseph or Jordan Phillips. It feels like when the ball is snapped, and I noticed this as well, when the ball is snapped, they're sort of hesitant. Like they're not exactly holding the ground exactly like the way that they need to. They know they're going to get pushed back a little bit. There's just not this thought to attack. And I know that, some defensive linemen say, okay, well, I watch this when I'm scouting guys. Normally it'll come from, okay, you get an undersized 3 technique guy, somebody who might be 290, 295 pounds, and their run defense grades might be higher in our system because they're getting in the backfield and they're making tackles, but they're doing so not really by holding the line of scrimmage, getting patient, being able to peek in the backfield and then rip the guy away to make the tackle. It's more of you're almost treating it like a pass rush. You're picking the gap, you're getting through the gap, and then you're sort of trying to meet the running back before he can make a move and get to the line of scrimmage. Is that a strategy that, now again, I've only watched the Ravens game and a little bit of some of the games that I watched from them the last couple of weeks when it comes to run defense, so it's not like I've watched like all of last year to see if they maybe have tried this with Mozzie Smith, but I think about Mozzie Smith and how athletic he is, right? Is that, and even with the rest of the interior defensive line, something that they could all do together, or that maybe one of them could do individually? They could turn into a more attacking style and try that as a run defense strategy. Because right now it's very clear that them trying to hold the line of scrimmage, well, they're not doing that at all whatsoever. So is that a strategy that is even worth exploring for this team?
It could be. The issue with this stuff is when you're trying to correct these things stylistically, you end up moving yourself into a more complex structure. Right, is you start having to do stunts and twists and quick penetration stuff and kind of moving gaps post snap. Well, now there's way more thought involved, particularly for the linebackers, trying to figure out and clean up who is where, what's my assignment. And if those guys are struggling playing straight up, the linebackers I'm talking about, the supporting safeties, why would you want to make their life more difficult? Why would you have confidence that they can pick and read that stuff on the fly? Kendricks may be able to do it, but the rest of the group, particularly the safeties coming down, is a complete mess at the moment. So it's tough to do. And they've tried this with Lawrence. It's basically, can we move him inside slightly and just have him go rip really quick so we can kind of clean the picture for the other guys? And that hasn't worked. So could you maybe flip-flop some of those roles? You could certainly give it a try. At this point, it's like, what else are we going to do? We got to find something to figure this out. But you again find yourself in the bind of, okay, to try and get Mozzie Smith to be effective for us in the run game, do we either increase the pressure on our linebackers, which we're not so sure about, just kind of in terms of thinking of reading the game out, or do we then have to say, well, DeMarcus can't play inside as a nose or a 1, so we got to get someone else in there to then have Mozzie in the spot we like, and so for some reason we've taken DeMarcus Lawrence off the field to put a bad player on the field, just because we think it will help someone out.
Right.
So it's always just the trade-off of, I'm not sure how they get to that. They could just try and cut it loose, but I'm not so sure watching some of the reps, they aren't trying. Like, I think they are trying. Often Mozzie will come off the ball and like the leverage is fine. There's some burst and juice to it, and he still just gets rocked. There's not really much you can do, right? If the leverage and technique is okay, and he just gets sourced at the line of scrimmage, it's like, well, then maybe he just doesn't have the anchor to play inside for us in the NFL. He's not a guy you're going to shuffle to the perimeter as a base down guy and then kick him inside. It's just not what he's built to be. So I just don't know how you overcome those issues. I don't think there's like if they just try and be more attack based, they start playing with more 4-man fronts. I just don't think that that's going to be like a one size fits all correction for them.
It's going to be interesting because if they don't fix the run defense, I don't think this is a playoff team at all whatsoever. And if it obviously continues to go like this, there's going to be a lot of defensive changes. Joseph and Jordan, those are older 1-year contract guys, I believe anyways. if Mozzie Smith cannot play better, you mentioned if they just get to the conclusion where they don't think that he can anchor, especially in whatever system that they want to run, is this his last year with the team? Do they try to move on from him and replace him? And is it an entirely new interior defensive line for the Cowboys? We will have to see. I do want to talk about Jalen Carter because this performance was unbelievable against the New Orleans Saints. But before we get to that, the best part of football season is always checking out the post-game stats, right? Which players scored 2 or more touchdowns, which quarterbacks threw for more or less than 350 yards. If you think that you could pick what's going to happen before kickoff, then play Pick 6 from DraftKings, an official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. You download DraftKings Sportsbook, the DraftKings Pick 6 app, and select between 2 and 6 players and choose if they'll have more or less in the stat. That's simple. And for the first time, all Pick 6 players, you check this out, new customers pay $5 on your first Pick 6 set, and you get 50 in free Pick 6 credits. You got some interesting matchups coming up next week, and again, download the app, take a look at it, and if you just go, whoa, this number, way too low, way too high, whatever it is, bet more or less. It's a fun way to have a little skin in the game with all the NFL action that you're watching. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now. Use a promo code PFF. That's promo code PFF for new customers to get $50 in Pick 6 credits when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit cpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions do vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits do expire within 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. Jalen Carter, monster day for the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles are funny. Eagles have played in 2 games now where I feel like they should have lost the football game, and they didn't. So hats off to them. Obviously picking up the 2 wins. The one in Green Bay, I felt like they didn't play very well. Got the win. It's fine, Against the Saints, I felt like they played pretty bad for the Eagles standards, going through a lot of injuries as well. You're going up against a good team in the Saints, but they come away with the win at the end of the day. Clock hits 0, and they had more points than the other team. So kudos to them. Jalen Carter, I think, is a big reason why they were able to have some of the defensive success that they did. 94.0 pass rush grade this week with a 30.4 pass rush win percentage. That is a monster number. And the reason why I'm glad that you brought him up and I wanted to talk about him is because I said this on the show the other day. If you just look at the common stat sheet, if you will, tackles for loss, sacks, Jalen Carter, 0 sacks in this game. But 4 pressures and all the numbers that I mentioned to you, when you watch the film, he was a beast. So when you saw Jalen Carter, Ollie, what did you see with him going up against a good offensive line in the Saints who went through some injury, but he was able to capitalize in a big way?
Yeah, just that monster performance, as you said, was everywhere in the backfield, was just holding the point, was explosive off the ball. The thing that stands out to me with him, particularly as a pass rusher, is contact just doesn't even matter to him. He will get hit sometimes. He'll have guys coming from funky angles, and he can just stay on a straight line. He has this really incredible balance for someone that big, someone that explosive. We know the violent hands. We know he's got plenty of moves in his bag when he needs them. But he just has an ability at that size, even when he maybe plays too high or, it's not exactly as you would want it to be. It just doesn't faze him. He'll get hit, not bothered, can bend and move in a way people just shouldn't be able to do at that size. And I just don't know how you can deal with that. And they did an unbelievable job, which we could get into if you wanted to in more detail. But Fangio was like at peak, I'm done with this. I'm done with trying to include some of the stuff you guys were doing last year. Done with trying to keep some of the verbiage. Enough with that already. It's been awful to start the year. We'll go into exactly what I want to do. They had a perfect plan to slow down what's been the best offense in football through the first 2 weeks. And he was able to basically just get Jalen Carter one-on-one in every situation on rundowns, crushed everyone, just up and down the line, moved inside, moved outside, crushed everyone. And then in pass rush reps, it's just someone that big, moving that quick, so explosive with the hands. I just don't know how you can deal with that when you face one-on-one with the guy. Yeah,
I want to dig into exactly what you talked about with sort of what Fangio is doing setting up this matchup, but I agree with you, mate. You're watching that film, and he's mainly going up against Cesar Ruiz, the right guard for the New Orleans Saints, and I mean, He's working him. I mean, he's just working him all game. And I feel bad for Cesar Ruiz, right? I think that Ruiz has been off to the best start of his career so far. Generally lower in PFF grades. I think for his entire career, he has never had a season-long PFF blocking grade above 50 as an average. He's had some games that are a little bit higher, some games that are a little bit lower. But for the last 3 or 4 years, that's pretty much just been the steady average as somebody who has been playing at replacement level, I think, for that team. First 2 weeks of the season, Saints offensive line was playing really well, Ruiz included. This past week against Jalen Carter, not so great. And specifically, I mean, I remember scouting him and watching him at Georgia. And sometimes it's just really easy, right? Like sometimes scouting is just really easy. You watch a player and you go, okay, that dude's a freak. And Jalen Carter, I'm glad that you mentioned it. There were times when I watched him at Georgia where he's down in his stance, 3-point stance, like a 3-technique defensive tackle. Ball was snapped, he pops right up. Doesn't really care about maintaining the leverage going through the contact. Just pops straight up. Doesn't matter. He's stronger than everybody. He can withstand his ground. You mentioned the core strength and the leg strength that this dude has to take contact and to just stay balanced and stay where he is. That is unbelievable. And then you go into some of the pass rush moves, which I think he's developing more and more. Any combination that involves a club move, I mean, I don't know how you stop it from him. There were so many times in this game where he hit Cesar Ruiz with some sort of club combo. It was either a club rip move, a club arm over, something where he was essentially like punching him on the side of his body, and there was nothing that Cesar Ruiz could do about it. And when somebody like that is playing as fast and free and as confident, that has the power that Jalen Carter does, it allows you to get really versatile with what you're doing with him in the front. So what were you alluding to when you were talking about sort of what he has been in this Fangio system and sort of the ways that they're deploying this guy?
Yeah, but really interesting against the Saints. Obviously, as we said, most explosive offense in football through 2 weeks have been pretty, I wouldn't say basic, but what they've been trying to do has been pretty, like they've put it out there on Front Street. We want to be the most condensed team in the NFL. We want to run the ball a ton. We want to have 2 double teams on every play wherever possible. We protect our tackles and we hit play action shots. And that's how we're going to do this thing. And Fangio did just a really impressive job of getting to these kind of like walking move fronts, which sounds complex, but is really, really not. They just stemmed a ton. They would just move everyone a gap before the snap, right? And it goes back to Lou Anarumo was huge on this 2 years ago when the Bengals defense got good, right? Which is instead of stemming, which is the classic way everyone stands up, everyone bounces down one gap, and you do that to try and mess with who's doubling who. You throw the communication off where you can with the offensive line, right? You just check, do they all know their sound and what they're trying to execute? And you just try and mess with some of the communication and some of the assignments for the offensive line. Instead of just doing that, what Lou did and what Fangio started to do this week was you kick everyone down one gap, but you start walking a linebacker down, right? When Anarumo did it, they would have Jermaine Pratt just meander all over the front. You didn't know where he was going to be, and they would move around. And they would use Zach Braun this weekend to move, to kick him down, walk somewhere along the line of scrimmage to get to 6 at the snap, rather than having 5 on the first line. Then have 6-0 box, 6-1 box, 6-2. They had a snap of 6-3 in the box. They're just like, we are not getting run on, and you do not get 2 doubles or even really 1 double. We want your guys playing one-on-one football against Jalen Carter and Graham. That's our plan, and we think we can beat you up. And they just did. He was just unbelievable off the ball. Really, really impressive plan. And what's funny with the Saints is everyone loves the use of motion. I love the use of motion. I love the pre-snap movement. It's great. I do think people get bogged down in the sense of if motion is high, you're therefore like smart and intelligent and good, and motion low is bad. There's very little like, what are you trying to achieve with the motion? Right. One of the issues with motioning at that higher rate and being such a run-based team, the reason most teams in the NFL don't stem so much, even though it's effective, is it's really hard to time it up. You don't know when the snap's coming, right? So if you go hard count, as the Saints did against the Eagles, you can just crease them because they're all waiting to move and they're all looking around like, when do we go? When do we go? You hard count it. Those guys aren't properly set. When you motion at that rate, you trigger the stem off the motion. Once the motion man goes, if it's not like a escort motion or a fast motion where the motion is going at the snap into a wall of blocks, which is how the Saints do it. They kind of motion reset and then, they run the play. As the motion completes, you all move, and all of a sudden, they've done their motion part. They were trying to achieve something with the motion, trying to move someone out of the box. They're trying to, reposition someone in the formation, and you've just now moved on them, and they all have to look around and go, God damn it, we've got 5 seconds on the play clock. We've got to figure out who's blocking who. So it was just a masterful use of who is our best player? Where's our best matchup? What can we do to make him stop the thing they do best? That's what Fangio did, and Carter delivered. And it was like, the thing I love about him is he gets kind of these knocks for not having the motor and all that stuff, which I think is somewhat valid and is fair. Although the one play where he was clearly gassed on Sunday, he got a pass knocked down, which is just like all-time Jalen Carter level God mode stuff.
Yes.
The fun he has playing, the fun he has of this, as you said, may not be the best use of trying this move, may not be the best time. My technique may be off, but I'm just going to try it because I've grown up in football being able to get away with doing everything because I bested everyone on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so difficult to do that in the NFL, to just be so clearly the best player on the field. And yet on Sunday, he was just in a different stratosphere to everyone trying to block him.
I thought this was interesting, and I don't really know what to do with this information, but I found it because when Carter was one-on-one with Cesar Ruiz, I had a thought, and I was like, are they now giving Carter just like the matchup treatment, right? Because when you look at the Saints offensive line, I think that you look at two potential weak spots, even for as good as they have played as a unit over the last 2 weeks. You look at two potential weak spots, Trevor Penning and then Cesar Ruiz. Eric McCoy's playing fantastic. Lucas Patrick's been playing fantastic. Tulise Fuanga, even for a rookie, has been playing really well as their left tackle. So you saw that those were probably their two weak links that you would want to go after. And it felt like Carter exclusively went up against Ruiz. So I was watching that tape and I was like, are they just moving him around and they're playing him, smartly so, in front of whoever the worst offensive lineman is on either team? So I looked up some like snap position pivots that he has had. And what I found was something different. I found that of the 145 snaps that Jalen Carter has played this year, he has only played one on the right side of the line of scrimmage for the defense. Every other snap that he's played, you mentioned, he plays inside out. They'll play him as they'll play him at left end. They'll play him as a Leo, if you want to call it. They'll play him at left defensive tackle, all of that. He has only played one snap, and I believe it was just at right defensive tackle, which I didn't watch the snap, but it could have very well been basically like a shade nose tackle, right? He just happened to be like shading to the right side of the line of scrimmage. So everything that Jalen Carter does is basically on that left side of the line of scrimmage. I'm very curious if that's just going to be his usage moving forward, because I thought I was going to find one thing when looking up the numbers, and I actually found the opposite, how exclusive he is in where they play him. And I wonder if that changes at all as we go through the season and matchups maybe change a little bit. But it did. The thing is, though, it didn't change against the Falcons, right? I mean, like, and if you're going to flip him, you're going to want him not going up against Chris Lidstrom, because Chris Lidstrom plays that spot for the Falcons. So you would want it on the other side, and yet they said, nope, we're just playing Jalen Carter on the left side of our defense. And I don't know. I just felt that was very interesting, that they have not, for as much as they are willing to be versatile with him inside and out, they have not been as willing to be versatile with him going from left to right, which I thought, again, was an intriguing finding when looking at the numbers. And
it's weird because Fangio is not like a doctrinaire. These guys play in these spots. As you mentioned, he plays inside, outside on one side of the line. That, every single play, you have a different strength of formation. You can move people around to try and get to how you want to put your best players in certain positions. It's not like you're just playing a certain front, and so he has to be on that side of the line of scrimmage every single time. So I'm not quite sure what the reasoning would be, whether it's like just a preference thing, whether it's a conversation with the player. It's definitely something to watch. I would prefer, ideally, to just, as you say, go matchup hunting. But where can we put our best player on their worst player? And let's do it as often as possible. And you can do some of that stuff post snaps. You can start on the left side, but your like path to the quarterback or path to the backfield on a run play is looping towards the other side of the line of scrimmage. So they do some of that with him, but he's just at his best as a freight train. You want him getting off the ball and just exploding things immediately. So yeah, I'm fascinated to watch. I think it's a good note. It's something we should definitely track throughout the season of how much are they willing to move him around. Does it matter if they move him around or not? But it's certainly something I would want to see.
Last group that we want to talk about, we do want to get into the Giants defensive line having the best day of the season outside of Dexter Lawrence. But before we hit that, this show is sponsored by our friends at BetterHelp. As an adult, do you still make time to learn new things as often as you like? Or is that something that you feel like you lost in childhood? Kids, they're always learning, they're always growing. But as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. It can happen. Life gets very busy. Therapy, it can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because that back-to-school era really can come at any age. Therapy, it can be a useful tool for getting better and understanding how your mind actually works to become more aware of your own patterns, your behavior, and how to improve them. It's useful for everybody, not just people struggling with something specific. As a personal endorsement, I've been doing therapy for a year and a half, and it's been something that initially it was something that I needed help with, that I was struggling with, but now it's become really a great every other week thing where I just get kind of this checkup and I get to sort of express what I'm going through in life, and it's allowed me to sort of uncover, why I think the way I do, why I react the way I do, and be the best version of myself that I absolutely can. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp is convenient, flexible, and entirely online way to get therapy that is right for you. You just fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/PFF to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/PFF. So the Giants getting a big win. I'll call it a big win because I don't know how many the Giants are going to get this season. Over the Cleveland Browns, 21-15, and I think the defensive line was a big reason why. And I do think we need to be honest and talk about how the Cleveland Browns offensive line is struggling right now as a whole, going through some injuries and just not good play along that offensive line. But we'll start with the positive and what we're talking about and focusing on here. Giants defensive line, the pass rush win percentage for their big four, the guys who played the most on that defensive line. Defensive tackle Elijah Chapman, he had the highest pass rush win rate because he probably had the most one-on-one opportunities when you got guys like Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and Brian Burns also on the defensive line. But shout out to Elijah Chapman, 27.8% pass rush win percentage. Brian Burns had a 15.2. Dexter Lawrence had a 15.0. And then Kayvon Thibodeau had an 11.1. Ollie, when you watch the Giants defensive line, what'd you think of this group and how they played?
Yeah, unbelievable. The speed off the ball is just absurd. And I know DeJuan Jones, who we may get into, is a heavy-footed fellow at the best of times anyway. But Brian Burns beating him out of his stance was just outrageous. Yeah. As good as any player is, you could survive some of those reps, absolutely, if you're a better player, if you're more twitchy anyway. But they're just somewhere. It's like he knew the snap count, man. He's it's before the ball's even in Watson's hands. He's around the corner. He's in the backfield. So he was on fire. Lawrence, obviously, one of the best, if not the best, interior players in the league. And the way they use Chapman is really interesting. He's a guy, I think, who throughout the year is going to have these massive swings of having impactful weeks and then just, nothing happening the next week. But the fact they have him as the fourth guy and the skill set being just pure torque, undersized, fire off the ball, get across the face of someone, create disruption, force someone to panic to have to help, and then everyone else who's flying into the space you've created are the three best players, hopefully, on our defense, the way we've built this thing. So they just have a really, really good group. I think the skills overlay really well. They've been pretty poor for most of the year. Burns was poor in week one. Thibodeau was a non-factor in week one. Yeah. But they got the best interior defensive guy in the league, and they at least have, for whatever you think of Burns and Thibodeau particularly, they do have speed off the snap with the three other pieces. So your best player can do everything for you right in the middle of the line of scrimmage, and everyone else is so explosive that I think no matter how good the line is, you are going to get some weeks where it's just too overwhelming. Everything happens too fast. Quarterback panics. And you just start racking up the pressures and the sacks.
Yeah, and I think that it all starts with Dexter Lawrence, you mentioned, and I don't know this for sure, but I believe the Giants probably went into this year saying, hey, we got Brian Burns on one side, and we got Kayvon Thibodeau on the other. One of those guys is going to be able to win on one-on-one. We think they are talented enough to do that, especially because of the attention that Dexter Lawrence commands in the middle. And again, I'm not sure if this is the case, but I feel like it could be. I feel as though in week one, the Giants might have entered the season thinking we can get Burns and Thibodeau those one-on-one, straight-up one-on-one opportunities because of what the presence that Dexter Lawrence is in the middle. And even with that being the case, the pass rush win percentages for both of those guys was low through the first 2 weeks. And what I noticed the most about rewatching the Giants defensive line film from this past weekend is the utilization and success that they had on stunts. So getting even their talented fast pass rushers unique opportunities to be loopers on a stunt and be able to attack one shoulder with full speed or whatever it was. And I felt like they had a lot of success doing that. There was a specific play where, they were executing a pirate stunt, which, if you think of what a common stunt is, it is you have a crashing player and you have a looping player, right? The idea is the crashing player takes both of the blockers that are right in front of them, and then the looping player is taking a little bit more time to get there, but he should be free, or at least if one of the offensive linemen is able to break off of the crashing player, they're doing so trying to recover, and you're probably able to at least attack the outside shoulder with a lot of speed when you're coming around the edge for a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau or Brian Burns. And with a pirate stunt, you're doing that with two crashers, and then you have a looper coming over the top. So I noticed that they ran an interior pirate stunt with, I believe it was Chapman and Dexter Lawrence, who were both slanting to one direction, and then Kayvon Thibodeau was coming screaming around the edge. And I saw that I don't think that ended in a sack or anything like that, but you're getting to watch them very, very quickly at that point because of the athleticism that you talked about with those edge rushers. I don't necessarily know what to call this three-man weave stunt. Maybe it's just a stunt addition, but I remember seeing a play where Lawrence was the crasher, Thibodeau was coming around the end, but then also you had Jason Pinnock coming around the end on the other side too. So it was almost like a double looper type of a stunt that was more of a timed or layered stunt where different guys could have come in and attacked the pocket. So the creativity in which Shane Bowen, their defensive coordinator, displayed this weekend with the defensive line, I was very encouraged by, because these guys weren't really able to win one-on-one like they thought they maybe could have going into the season. When I'm talking about Burns and Thibodeau, that pass rush win percentage for both of those guys was lower than what you wanted it to be. It was lower than what you paid Brian Burns to be, and it was lower than what you drafted Kayvon Thibodeau to be. So instead of banging your head against the wall and simply saying, nope, these guys got to play better, I think they were willing to go to more creative and advantageous situations with their speed. And like you mentioned, it helps when DeJuan Jones was just no matchup at all for Brian Burns on that right/left side of the line of scrimmage. I mean, he could not protect his outside shoulder against Burns. He was too quick for him. So that was just basically going to be a win every time the ball was snapped. But on the other side and throughout the line of scrimmage, I thought they did a really good job of keeping these guys free and maximizing that speed, utilizing a lot of those stunts. So I like the creativity that they were able to show as well.
Yeah, certainly. And, I've said this to you before, when you just see raw blitz rate, pressure rate, it's often meaningless to me. I want to know, what was the intent of the blitz and the pressure? Show me what was the target plan, what was their plan, and how did they adjust throughout the game? And Bowen's plan was, if you look at the stuff they ran, you mentioned the loopers and the twists and some of the pressures they ran, they were screaming it into the middle of the line of scrimmage. That's what they wanted to do. And that is a telltale sign of DC saying, I don't respect this quarterback will climb up through the pocket. He's just not going to do it. He's either going to bail or he's going to panic. He will not take kind of the first step and then try and rip out, right, climb through the pocket and try and go. That's why you want it all kind of coming, as you said, layered around and swooping into the face. And he was correct in that. I will say, the Browns have had this now for all 3 weeks. Ken Dorsey had this issue in Buffalo as well. And I don't know if it's him setting this stuff, line coaches. I'm not sure how their building operates with this stuff. Their protection plans are just abysmal, every week. They get caught out with stuff consistently. They rarely adjust. And Bowen, for as inventive and cool as some of the stuff he ran, a lot of that true blitz stuff was as basic as it could ever get, which was, we will open the game. We're going to blitz away from the back. Most basic pressure you can run at any level of football. Look at where the back is. Send a guy in off the edge, opposite to the back. You take the end guy, you crash inside the shoulder of the tackle, and you hope that the back panics and you get a free runner on the outside, right? And the line is left with a choice in their protection rules. What do we want to do? Either you let the end crash inside and the back picks him up and screens him, right? Not ideal. The NFL doesn't do that. They take most dangerous, right? The tackle takes that guy, you squeeze the edge. You let the back come across. That's how almost all NFL teams operate. So they blitz away from the back, and they are getting in every single time. The backs have no idea where they're scanning or looking, and it's just free season on Watson. Then they make an adjustment in the third quarter. They run this thing like 4 or 5 times. It hits every time, right? Or Watson gets rid of the ball in a daze. In the third quarter, they make an adjustment to say, cool, we'll start scanning out there. That would maybe be helpful. And so Bowen just says, all right, now I'll just blitz the back. So the back is now moving across from the sidecar across Watson to go and pick up where he thinks the pressure's coming from, and it's coming back from where he was before. That is not complex stuff. And I get they were rolling through so many linemen, right? They had injuries all over the place. They had injuries during the game. They were getting wrecked up front with one of the best players in football, and Lawrence. They got the 2 fast guys screaming off the edge and looping back inside. It's a lot of moving pieces. I get that. But just running the most basic protection stuff of we squeeze everything inside, we let the widest rushers come, is like day one college football stuff, let alone, stuff in the pros. And they still cannot get this stuff right. And they get caught out with it every single week. So there was definitely like major credit to the players. I just thought they were so gassed up. They were flying around. It was fun to see Thibodeau like play at that kind of speed. And to see him, as you mentioned, in a place where what are his best traits? Well, balance is like right up there. So having him curve around where he can maintain his speed and momentum all the way through running on an arc, which is not easy for a lot of these people. That's really impressive stuff. But there was as much blame, I think, on just the protection plan, the individual players for the Browns, as it being like a really, really necessarily great plan from Bowen and the Giants.
Yeah, and with Thibodeau, it's been something where I went back, and I think we talked about this maybe for our first episode when we did In the Trenches. I know we talked about it in the review show when I was disappointed in how the Giants' defensive line was playing to start the season. And I said, I went back and I watched, not that sacks are everything, but I went and I watched Thibodeau's 11.5 sacks last year. And, some of them, they're effort, they're cleanup sacks, right? But there's some other reps in there where you go, okay, like, I see why you were drafted where you were. Like, I see that from you. And even watching this game against the Browns, on the reps that Kayvon doesn't win, he at least shows a little bit of something. Like, he shows some hand speed. He's just not getting there or winning quickly enough to be impactful right now at the NFL level. And so it's so hard for me to quit Kayvon Thibodeau. For as much as that pass rush win percentage has been lower than I've wanted it to be, he hasn't exactly been the individual one-on-one winner that you have just wanted him to be at his draft status. It's hard for me to quit him. So it was nice to see him and Burns really be able to utilize that speed this past week, even if, like you said, it was maybe more of a Cleveland Brown failure, to at least see that if you fail as an offensive lineman, Thibodeau does have that speed and recognition and that deployment from what we saw this past week to be able to get in there and continue to win and be disruptive. I at least was continued to be encouraged by that. So I'm not ready to sort of like give up on Thibodeau yet. I see some flashes from him, but you mentioned what Brian Burns was able to do and sort of what Chapman was able to do as well. And I thought it was a good week for the New York Giants. And I thought that we needed to give them some praise because, again, I don't know how often we will be able to do that this season.
I mean, that 4-man group, that the skills make so much sense together. It is bizarre they have not been more impactful right away. They should be, if not an elite group, at least in terms of like when you get into the measurables, like hey, the team's not winning games, tough down and distances on the field a lot, do they get gas? We should be able to at least go, well, through the first 2 quarters, if you look at the pressure rate, they're actually really good. Like that's where they should be at, just based on the skills. They all just overlap and weave together nicely with the 2 speed burners, 1 more balance, 1 more straight dip and rip. You get the wrecking ball inside. You've got now a juiced up guy playing inside. If you like, they can run whatever they want, right? They can just go 4 down and go, we'll outspeed you, someone will crush you inside, or we can start doing more of the fancy loop stuff. And these guys are so quick off the perimeter. Them looping around is different than having one of the heavier ends loop around. Like it's a different world to live in, trying to get out to those guys. So that should be there. And so at least we got to that, as you said, it shows that when a team is not at the level, when the talent isn't there or the protection plan is off, they can punish you, not just to like a decent level, to a 40 pressure, 10 sack level, which is what this group should be able to do.
Yeah, and I mean, you throw Azeez Ojulari in there as well. I know he had some good reps too, and it's like you said, on paper, the reason why I think we were so disappointed in how the Giants defensive line started the season is because we know what it can be. We saw some glimpses of that. This is still one of the, when you talk about 4-man fronts, like this is one of the highest potential 4-man fronts that we do have in the NFL. So it was nice to see them play very well. I've still got high hopes for them throughout the season that they can be a staple part of that team because quite frankly, they need them to be. Go follow all of Ollie's great work over at the Read Optional Substack. He's not just breaking down trends play, but so many other things. Him and John Layer do a fantastic job taking deep dives throughout the NFL, doing a lot of different things, writing, podcasting, all that good stuff. Make sure you go check it out. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That's Ollie Connolly. Thank you guys so much for watching the In the Trenches episode for week 3. You know the drill. We will be back here with you next week to discuss more trench play. We'll see you guys then.